All right, here we go. Oh, good. There's 21 of you. We only got 38 students in the course. Why we have only 21, I don't know, but hey, I guess that's what it is, right? All right. Let's do a mic check. Make sure you can hear me. Make sure everything's coming across loud and clear. 5 by 5 in radio speak. That's 5 for volume, 5 for clarity. You don't know that because you never worked a radio job. I did. All right. So. Uh-huh. All right. Dismiss that. Go here. Yes to both. All right. Very good. It's amazing. My gift or my voice? The right answer is both. All right. So. Okay, guys. So let's get the following out of the way before we go any further. What do you have to bring tomorrow? Number 2, pencil. I do not recommend mechanical pencils because they tend to break, snap the test, or snap the lead itself, causes a problem. Don't do it. I don't know if you even allowed it. Bring a regular pencil. They probably have them there because they're your kids and they assume lowest common denominator. So they're going to assume you're not going to bring anything. Bring blue and black pens. Why both? You're not allowed highlighters or anything like that. They're the only colors that are allowed on the test. If you are the kind of person who likes to mark up things, highlight things, underline things, having 2 colors might be a little handy for that regard. Definitely bring a bottle of water. They probably will let you bring it into the testing center, but leave it on the floor. They're not even supposed to do that, but they might. So bring it along. You are allowed to have snacks when the break happens, and you keep all that stuff in your bag, so you bring all that stuff with you. Phones. Phones need to not enter the room. Do not bring a cell phone into that testing room. Listen to me. It's more than just you screwing up you. Should we leave our bags at the school? No, bring your bag. They'll have a spot. Ray can confirm this because he's taking an AP before. They should have a spot over in the army where you're just going to dump your bags like on the floor outside of the testing room. Okay, so you can you put your phone in there, you can put your lunch in there, your snack in there, whatever. You're going to be in there for a long time. So if you feel like you're going to need to eat or anything like that, make sure that you do that. It goes without saying that can we go on the phone in between? I don't think so. Uh, yeah, don't use the pen with 4 colors. I mean, I guess you can get away with it, but if the black and blue inks don't work, those pens are terrible. If they're the ones I'm thinking of from like 1985, they're terrible. Just bring some regular pens. I mean, they probably have extras of those too, but bring. My advice is you're doing a lot of writing, and this is like hot take, but a good pen reduces writing fatigue. Like that's not a joke. Like if you have a crap pen and you have to constantly push real hard to get the ink out of it, or if it flows too freely and you're making a mess, that's bad too. You need a pen that's reliable that you know is going to give you a good result, that's going to write well, and is not going to bleed all over the page, and also is going to put enough ink on the page and you're not constantly rewriting the same thing or pushing super hard as you write. Wrist fatigue's a real thing. Hand fatigue's a real thing. You guys are not used to writing long form, so you have to keep that in mind. You're gonna have to maybe shake your hand out, stretch your hand out. You might be laughing at me, but I'm being serious. Like I'd be stretching my hand before I get in there. I would bring like I don't know a tennis ball or something and squeeze it, or a stress ball, or even just make sure you stretch it out real good. I'm not joking. You guys never do this. If I had to sit down and write a long thing like that, I would stretch my hand out because you're going to get cramps. Your wrist is going to start to hurt. You're not used to locking into this position for 3 hours, but you're going to be. So these are like silly things, but like you'd be surprised. Like it's the kind of thing that matters because at the end of the day, what's really going to make the difference is there's going to come a point. Every single one of you is going to have this moment where it's somewhere in the middle of the part 2. It's probably halfway through the DBQ. And your subconscious is going to be real tired. You're not going to want to do this no more. You're going to stop caring. And you're going to say, F it. Like that thought's going to hit your brain. Screw it. I'm done. Whatever it is, it is. That's the moment where you need to fight yourself. You need to get through that. Because if you submit to that, you're going down a full grade. I'm being serious now. If you're going to get a 4 and you think like that and you give in to that, and what do you mean give in to it? Actually adopt the mentality of I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. If you start thinking like that, Your 4 is going to become a 3. Your 3 is going to become a 2. I'm telling you now. Why? That's how the subconscious works. You're going to be basically self-sabotaging. You're going to have a self-fulfilling mental prophecy that you're making happen. Don't do that. Instead, remind yourself. Not that you're almost done. Think the other way. Look at how much you've done to get to this moment. Is this the part where you want to crap your pants? Not really. There is no scrap paper allowed on any AP exam except for AP Physics. So, no. You can analyze the docs by writing all over the test. You write on the test. The test is yours to write on. You can write all over that test. You do not get scrap paper. So when it comes to a spot to outline or whatever, do remember you can outline the essay booklet. You're almost certainly not going to finish the essay, fill out the essay booklet totally. But I wouldn't even do that. I would just write on the test. I know you have limited space for the SAQ, but how much space do you get for a DBQ and the LEQ? Well, you get enough. I mean, if you legitimately fill up the DBQ, LEQ book, you got a 5. Okay? So, well, Ray Tang proves that we're wrong. You get scrapped for AP Chinese. I believe you on that, Ray. But as far as I know, beyond any test I know that no social studies test gives you scrap paper. Now, you maybe should never have gotten scrap paper. There are some schools that just give you scrap paper, but you're not supposed to get them, all right? Regardless. So bring your blue pen, bring your black pen, bring your pencil, something to drink. Do we get 3 pages for the SAQ or only 1? What do you mean? So you're going to get... Here, I'll show you. Hang on. AP World SAQ answer sheets. Okay, they look just like this. No, not just like that. Hang on. They look just like this. That's what they look like. I'll zoom in. It's a box. It's your name. This is where you put question 2's response. In the AP Chinese in offer in our school. No. Why would we offer? It's not that we were poor. It's that we have one Ray Tang. I mean, how many kids can speak Chinese? Okay, so Sam, if I understand your question, if you're doing SAQ question 2, are you asking me? I know you can see the screen. You can't see the screen. Yeah, duh, you're on selfie cam. Duh, hang on. Thank you. Okay, so this is the sheet. I think you're asking me, does A get its own page? Does B get its own page? Does C get its own page for question 2? Or its own sections? The answer is no. It's just like you've seen in class when I'm showing you the student samples. This is what you get for SAQ question 2. It even has the watermark Q2 in the back. You put A, you put B, you put C. You fill it out as you want within these boxes, right? That's what you do. Question 3 and 4, just remember, if I could find it. Yep, it looks just like this. For the SAQ, it's going to look like that. SAQ question 3 and 4. And it says 3 or 4 on the same page because they're trying to save money. So make sure that you bubble in the question you're doing, and that's the answer you actually provide. Don't bubble in 3 and then write the answer to 4. You're going to get a 0. Okay? Don't do that. Oh, who could do that? Man, listen, there's one born every minute. Somebody will do it. So don't be the one. Okay? What else? What are the questions about the test do you want me to go over? Not the content, like the actual logistics of taking the test. You can bring your phone, shut the damn thing off. Do not let that thing go off in that testing site. Do not leave in your pocket. Do not assume, oh no, it'll be fine. I'll just keep it in my pocket. No. No. If you're diabetic, I know we don't know anybody who's diabetic, but if you're diabetic and you use your phone to test your blood sugar, I have to be honest with you, I don't know exactly how that works. I know that a lot of phones now do the app for the blood sugar testing. I don't know how that works in response to the test. I'd assume you'd have to leave the testing site supervised to check your blood sugar. I'd be honest with you, I don't really know. Here is a thing you might need to bring. This applies to anybody who's taking the test in the school. In other words, you have an IEP and you have AP College Board test modifications, which is only about 3 or 4 of you. You should have gotten a letter from the AP people that actually describe and show and etc. Your modifications. We have it on file in the school. The regulations do request you bring it. No one's going to check for it, but if you happen to have it, bring it. Now, why would I say that? Because there are instances, they've happened before, I'd rather go into a diabetic coma than check my blood sugar during this test and compromise. Yeah, I know, but I would rather you not go into a diabetic coma. Just saying, all right? So my point is, you got a list that describes the nature of your modifications if this applies to you. It's only a handful of you, but for you it matters. As I said, I told you a story. We had a kid who had a 1 and then got a retake because the school violated his modifications severely, and then he ended up getting a 5. The kid was always going to get a 5. He was one of my best students, but the school screwed him up. The proctors did not know that he was entitled to these things. So when the proctors had him in a separate location, they didn't know these things. I'll give you another example. We had a student who had Crohn's disease one time. That student was allowed, according to AP modifications, the ability to use the bathroom whenever they wanted to at any point during the exam. Okay, that's a big modification. The proctor at the time told her she wasn't allowed to leave. And she's like, yes, I am. And he said, no. And she said, well, I'm going. And he goes, you leave, your test is over. This was our substitute proctor who did not know her modifications. Now, when I got wind of this, I took care of it. But I may not be able to take care of it. I may not be available. They may not be able to find me. Who knows? So my point is, there is this letter. If you happen to have it, bring it. If you don't happen to have it, that's okay. Mr. Holonia has never had an incident like this happen while he's run testing. So the problems I'm talking about existed under a previous person who's no longer employed by the district. So in that respect, I think you're actually in good shape. We also have, well, that's why we want to do that. We want to make sure everybody has their modifications. Now, again, our guidance counselors have access to them. The school psychiatrist has access to them. And Mr. Aloni has access to them. So this is a very small number of you, and not many of you have a significant accommodation. For the most part, it's basically extra time. And if you're diabetic, you can check your blood sugar and have a snack. That's basically the extent of it. But all the same, you are entitled to what you're entitled to. And it doesn't hurt to explain what you know you're entitled to your proctor, because they may not be aware, okay? So if you say, hi, how are you? I don't know if you know, but I'm diabetic, and so I'm allowed to check my blood sugar. Like, it doesn't hurt to tell them that. Just, like, that's why we're in this special room together, because this is why I'm here. Or, hey, I don't know if you know, but I'm entitled to double time, just FYI. Whatever it might be, okay? Can I chew gum during the test? No. If for no other reason, you're going to annoy people. No gum. Do I get extra time as a diabetic? I don't know, dude. I'm being dead serious. Probably. Or something like they have to stop the testing clock if you check your blood sugar. You need to check your note. Check your letter. Check your AP modification. Like I said, it was a letter that was sent home. I can certainly try to find out early tomorrow morning what you get besides a separate location, but you very well might get extra time. I would imagine at the least, if you need a snack or to check your blood sugar, you stop the clock. How can you check? Well, you check by, you would have gotten a letter. You would have applied to the College Board for modifications. They would have approved those modifications, and you would have gotten a letter at home months ago. It would not have been a secret. You would have been well aware. The letter would have come from the College Board, not from us. In general terms, I don't think we have that many people in this test who actually have modifications, and I've tried to make sure everybody who's involved in that is covered. But you could certainly check with the guidance department tomorrow, your guidance counselor, but if I'm going to be honest with you, you got to gather up before those people are even really at their desks. Does it have to be a ballpoint pen? No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, don't bring a fountain pen, dude. But, like, no, it could be any pen. Just make sure it's something that is going to write well. If you write neatly, you write neatly. Like me, I write like crap, as you know. I would never bring a gel pen to this thing. It's just, they're going to bleed all over the place. Just forget it. I would only bring a ballpoint pen. But that's me. You know, my handwriting's terrible. If you have good handwriting, then you can be a little more like, all right, I'll bring a pen I prefer. If you have sloppy handwriting, or more likely, you have average handwriting that turns to slop when you're rushing, bring a pen that you know you'll be able to write well with. That's sort of the basics of what I would suggest there. All right, I don't want to spend too long on this logistic stuff. The bottom line is you have a test proctor. That proctor is supposed to walk you through the questions and walk you through, well, not the questions, but the directions and everything. It should take care of itself. You've taken tests before. You'll figure it out. This isn't exactly smashing atoms together. So with all that said, let's get to the stuff I wanted to talk to today. I want to try and knock it out in about a half hour and then give you whatever time remains to whatever you want to do. So what did I want to talk about? I want to talk about the history of communism in China. And this is a complicated issue, and it's going to have some reference to other things like the Soviets and so on, and some other international conflicts, but here we go. It's good coffee. All right, so Communism in China basically happens. If you want me to throw a year at you, I'm gonna guess now. 1946. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Let's see. The founding of, history, governance. Okay, history. No, we don't want any of that stuff either. The exact year, 1949. All right, I was close. 1949. So 1949, Mao defeats the nationalist Kuomintang party. They are forced to flee and relocate the Kuomintang, the nationalist government of China, to Taiwan, where Chiang Kai-shek, the ruler of China at this time, the general who was fighting the Chinese at this time, he's forced to flee to Taiwan, and he rules until his death in 1975, I think, as the head of Taiwan. And according to him and his party and the government of Taiwan around him, that they were in fact the true China and these communists were rebels. The Communist Party has actual control over mainland China after 1949. And they claim Taiwan is a state in a rebellious state against the government of China. Obviously, they both feel the other one is the fraud. The simple reality is, though, the Chinese Communist Party controls actual China, and Taiwan's government controls an island. So that's it, okay? So realistically, the Chinese Communist Party does, in fact, run China. So let's talk about these issues here. So first off, Mao Zedong is a true believer in communist theory. So a couple of these communists we've studied are true believers. Like, they really believe in the Marxist theories. They really believe that if you do this stuff, if you do these things, if you follow the Marxist theory, that you will eventually get a government that is actually sort of morally better. That doesn't mean he's not also a corrupted, evil animal, because he is. But he is a true believer. And when you're dealing with people who truly believe these things might actually work, you get some really, really bad policy out of this. So, unlike Stalin, Stalin was brutal. Stalin was an awful dictator. Stalin was a murderer. All of which is true of Mao. But Stalin at least was effective. By that I mean, when Stalin tried to force a series of industrial and military advancements within his society, although it cost the lives of his people to do this, it worked. I mean, to a degree, it worked. So that's a certainty. When it comes to Mao, Mao's policies were just one cluster bomb of bad after another. I mean, really dumb stuff. Stuff that just simply did not work. Now, Mao was revered. Mao was loved. And this is important to know, that unlike Stalin, who everybody knew was this brutal, horrific, totalitarian dictator, everybody knew about the purges, everybody knew about the Gulag system, everybody knew about the secret police and the KGB. There were very few people you could say who were actually loved Stalin. Like, very, very few people. And if they did, they were stupid, because Stalin was not a person who would ever really be capable of that kind of love. He was a interested monster, quite willing to engage in the most brutal acts necessary to maintain his power. That's just a fact. Mao was loved by a lot of the peasant Chinese. They truly did love Mao. And the cult of personality that forms around Mao is, without a doubt, legitimate. Like, it just is legitimate. It still exists in China today. So even today, when Chinese have the ability to look back at their history, look at Mao's policies and see just what hellishly bad results they brought. Look at the famines and the deaths and the horror show that was his policies. If you ask Chinese today, so how do you reconcile that? How do you square that with the fact that he's like the hero of the nation who started the Communist Party in China? And what you'll get out of most Chinese is something like, although they recognize the failings of his policies, because of him, China is great again. And that's a hard argument to argue against, because China is today the second richest nation on planet Earth. Now, how much of that is Mao's doing? Nothing, effectively. But the fact that Mao brought the sort of Communist Party into power and dragged China into something like a future and not locking in its imperial sort of cycles would be what, people of China today say, like, that was the ultimate good of Mao. Mao put the country on the path to the power it now enjoys. Does that power translate into better livelihoods and standard of living for its people? The answer is sometimes. The answer is not some other sometimes. No. So Ray asks, was he basically the Kim Il Sung of China? Kim Il Sung is the founding communist of North Korea. No, Kim Il Sung was a fool and a failure and relied upon China to even have any success. Mao transcends all that. Mao, quite literally, although Kim Il Sung was effectively worshipped, forced his people to basically worship him, and that's still kind of true today. Mao is still revered around all of China and is an ever-present part of China. And unlike in Korea, where there's been a dynasty of these Kims, the Kim dynasty, that all are brutal dictators, there's been no dynasty in China that like Mao's children took over or anything like that. Nothing like that has happened. And Mao has transcended his own party. They do. You're right. Now that part's similar. The Ray asked about personality cults in North Korea. All these communist dictators have personality cults. It's a big part of all dictatorships. It's a big part of all totalitarian states. Remember the bitter irony of any totalitarian state. This is a good thing to write. This will impress your readers. Totalitarian states, all of any fashion, communist, fascist, you name it, they all demand that you. Well, I'll explain. Riley. It's a good question. What's a personality cult? A cult of personality or a personality cult is the idea that you, as an individual member of these dictatorship societies, the totalitarian societies, you have no personal value. Riley's goals and Ray's goals and Matt's goals and Brandon's goals, these are not valuable. Your goals, your hopes, your dreams, your ambitions, and your wishes on a personal level are of no consequence. What matters in such a state is the state. And so you need to subsume your desires, put them down the bottom, and work towards the betterment of the nation. That's all totalitarian states will tell you that. However, in a sort of reversed irony of that thinking, the leader of such places are almost always revered in a godlike fashion. In other words, although individuals don't matter, this individual does, which is a hypocrisy, but nevertheless true. And they matter so much that you'll find iconography of them everywhere, much like a religious figure. So I'll give you an example from China. Mao had a thing called the Little Red Book, I believe it was called. Hang on. I'll find it for you. Mao's Red Book. What the heck was it called? The little Red Book. Yeah, I'm right. So here's the Little Red Book. This is quite literally what it is. There's a Mao and quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. Okay? And what you see here is a little schoolgirl and her classmates wearing a Communist Party button and holding a copy of the Little Red Book, given to them by the government. And the idea is you're supposed to carry this everywhere you go, and a good communist would have this in their pocket. It's like a good Christian might have a crucifix, or a good Jew might wear a yarmulke, or a good Muslim woman would cover her face in some way. These are religious rituals, effectively. Now, this is not a religion, but they're treating him and talking about him and worshiping him like a religion. What the hell was the thing? Not Mao's melons. Oh, man, hold on. Mao's fruit. I forget what the heck it is. There was a special fruit associated with Mao. The mango. Okay. This is legit. We never talked about the mango cult? I guess not. So this is, the mango thing. So basically, a delegation from, I think it was Pakistan, came to China during Mao's rule, a diplomatic mission, and presented Mao with a gift of mangoes. Mao tasted it and hated it. Thought it was bland and didn't taste like anything. So he gave the mangoes to the local people that were where the meeting was being held. He had some sort of countryside area that looked pretty, served as the backdrop for this meeting with these Pakistanis, and he gave them these mangoes. Ever since then, the town worships mangoes as like, like Jesus like fed the 5,000 with bread and fish, like Mao gave away these mangoes, so now that's like the mango is like the blessed fruit of Mao, despite the fact that Mao himself hated the mango and that's why he gave it away. He didn't think it tasted very good. So you got stuff like this where people put a mango on a plate on what is effectively an altar. Like that's cult of personality. It's transcending the political, and the man, or it's always a man usually, the dictator ruler becomes this godlike figure that is meant to be like the meta hero of the society. All the virtues of a good Chinese are embodied in Mao, in sort of theoretically. Now Mao was a piece of garbage, but this was the idea. Okay, so what was so bad about Mao? Well, a lot. So let's go back to Mao himself. Is this like how Lenin was mummified? Yeah, exactly that. Lenin's mummification is a good example of a cult of personality. I mean, imagine Donald Trump dies one day and they mummify him in a glass coffin and people show up to worship him wearing his political slogans or his hats, or one time he posed with a taco salad in a Twitter photo, so they bring taco salad to the coffin to show their respect for their fallen leader. That's a cult of personality. Or replace that with whatever political leader you want. Doesn't have to be a Republican. It could be anybody. It's a cult of personality. Now, we tend not to have that in America. In fact, America's built on the idea that kind of worship of an individual political figure is deeply offensive to the American sensibility. No political figure individually is supposed to transcend the state. So this is very different than a totalitarian state where the individual who runs society is the godlike figure. What you were saying before about how all totalitarian states have this idea that individuals themselves don't matter, and you need to serve the state, serve the nation, serve the people, serve whatever. But but at the top of the chain is the leader, who is an individual who somehow doesn't follow that rule, and they are indeed more important than society. That's a sort of a hypocrisy within the system. So, what are some things that Mao does that he makes him so goddamn bad? Well, a lot. So, firstly, Mao attempts, yeah, there we go. Great picture. So Mao attempts to copy what Stalin does. Mao and Stalin did not get along, by the way. A couple of reasons. Stalin thought Mao's communist revolution was a joke. And he thought that because Marx had said that communism had to come from the working class, the industrial working class. China didn't really have an industrial working class. Its people were peasant farmers for the most part, and the urban dwellers didn't work in factories or have those kind of factory skills. So Mao always resented the fact that Stalin viewed him as like some sort of bootleg, low-rent, washed up attempt at a communist. So when Mao would put in heavy industrial plans meant to increase, say, for example, steel production or whatever it might be, industrial capacity, military production, whatever. These were called the 5-year plans. Stalin had these. And the idea was from the beginning of the plan to the end of the plan, over the next 5-year period, we expect to do X amount of growth in these sectors. Now, when Stalin would do that, he would do that at the expense of other things. So, for example, people would starve in rural sides of the country, so the resources could be redirected to the industrial effort. So that was part of Stalin's brutal regime, is that people would be sort of forcibly starved or devastated in some way, so his economic plans can be met. Mao didn't have that industrial capacity to just sort of like put money into a problem and it'll sort of start happening the way the Russians could in theory. So instead, he has stuff like this like lunacy, where Mao tries his own 5-year plans. Again, the same basic idea: modernize China, improve industrial capacity, and get sort of a mechanized China going. And because they don't have things like factories, and they don't even have processes like a factory process would create, Mao starts encouraging everyday citizens to start making steel in the countryside, in their own backyards, in wilderness areas, in homemade, makeshift steel smelters. And These were extraordinarily dangerous. If you try to make steel and you don't know what the heck you're doing, you can go. You not only can kill yourself, you can kill a lot of other people. These would explode. I mean, if you look at that and you go, that doesn't look particularly safe. I see gigantic fireballs and a bunch of people just kind of haphazardly standing around. This seems like a bad idea. It's a monstrously bad idea. Stalin was a mess. I mean, Mao was a mess. He would come up with these plans, and with the same is true of pretty much every dictator. Of course, the plans get approved because how could they not get approved? If they weren't approved, then the dictator is going to kill you for saying, you can never go to Mao or Stalin and be like, hey, boss, listen. This idea about having peasants make steel in their backyards, it turns out that we're getting a lot of peasants maimed and killed, and these things are blowing up, and the few people that manage to pull it off create steel that's utterly useless because it's so low grade and low quality, we can't do anything with it. So I think we should change the plan. You cannot go to Mao and Stalin or say that. You'll be killed. Because they can't be wrong. The cult of personality says they're right. They're the godlike figure of the society. So it can't possibly, under any circumstances, so not under any circumstances are you going to be able to do that. It's just, no, no way. So instead what happens is the bad ideas are allowed to continue and the lies go up the top. So you create a system of terror, which Mao does and Stalin does, and of course, below you, your underlings will act in terror. So another example, Mao came up with this other brilliant idea, more stupidity. I mean, his ideas are terrible. They just fail. They just straight fail. Is the Great Leap Forward. So the Great Leap Forward was his attempt to both industrialize with 5-year plans mimicking Stalin, and then also an attempt to improve agricultural production through collectivization. So let's talk about that, because the Russians do the same thing. Collectivization. Collectivization is the idea that you take individual farmers and their individual farms, and instead of saying, okay, farmer A, you have this much farmland that you own, farm it, sell it for a profit, and we're going to tax you. That's not what happens. Instead, both the Soviets and the Chinese communists will create these massive collectives. Think of it like, imagine you go out to the back of your house and you remove all the fences from your house, your neighbors' houses, and everything. Remove all the fences. And you say, all right, now, you're not responsible for cutting your lawn. You're responsible for cutting all the lawns, which is now one massive lawn. Nobody owns any one lawn. Nobody's responsible for any one lawn. You're all now mowing the same lawn. Again, imagine you move all the fences. So you have this one gigantic open space backyard. So whose job is it to mow? How much are you going to mow? Are you going to put in the effort to mow 50% of that land when somebody's not putting in any effort to mow any of it? The answer is probably not. People are much more likely to care for things they own and benefit from than things that are collectively owned and they derive no particular benefit from. I'll give you an example. We talked about this in the past. The reason you have passes in the bathroom and the bathroom pass system, the reason you have to sign in at the bathroom at an iPad, you might think is because of vaping. And that's certainly true to an extent. But that policy didn't start with vaping. It started when a former student went into the boys' bathrooms, leaped on the wall, grabbed the pipe of the urinal, put his feet on the wall, and pulled till he ripped the entire urinal off the wall. Now, I don't know what kind of person you are, but I don't think even that particular lunatic would go into his own home, plant his feet on the ground, and pull and pull and pull on his toilet until it broke and exploded water everywhere and did $60,000 worth of damage, which is about the damage he did to the high school. I don't think so. So, why not? Well, he obviously did it because he thought it was funny. But it's funny because he's not going to directly pay for it, right? Even if he's caught, even if he's punished, it's a criminal act. He could be sued. But we didn't have cameras in the bathrooms on those times. We didn't have sign-ins in those days, so you really couldn't prove anything, right? A kid went into the bathroom, he comes out, somebody finds a couple hours later there's a massive flood in there and the toilet's been ripped off the wall. You can make accusations, but you have no proof, right? So even if if they can't catch him, and he knows they can't catch him, what are the actual consequences to him? None. The school's going to pay the bill. Somewhere, somebody, some program, some teacher is not going to get hired or is going to get fired because the school's now down $50,000. He's never going to see that consequence. It doesn't really directly affect him. So for him, it's just a funny story he gets to tell about how he did that. We used to have a hand-carved wildcat standing when you come to the front of the school in that triangular space where we have like that plaza and we have like those little bushes and such. There is a wooden plinth in there that used to have basically a human-sized wood-carved, I don't know, man-bear pig thing. It was like a cat. It was a wild cat. For a senior prank, somebody decided to take it, rip it off of there. This is all before cameras. Rip it off of there and hurl it into the pond. And it was found there like that Monday morning. That was their senior prank. Again, it's funny, except you don't realize, like, okay, but who's going to actually suffer for this? Well, nobody suffers. Nobody really cares about it. It's nobody's property. Really, it's the joint property of the schools. So you treat it that way. If you went into your house and you went into your living room and you thought it'd be really damn funny to take your mom's favorite painting, your dad's prized signed autographed football from his favorite football player, and you take it outside and hurl it into the sewer, I have a feeling you're not going to college because you're going to get killed by your parents. Like, this is not how people act. So when it's your property, you act very differently than when it's shared property. Is it still in the pond? I don't know, Ray. You got to go spelunking and find out. So this idea of having communal farming fails. It fails on every level. When nobody owns something, then nobody's responsible for it, right? Think about the way you treat all the property the school's ever given you. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. If I asked you where your copy is of that book you took out of the library last year, you still don't know where it is. Meanwhile, your cell phone might as well be your organ, right? It's like attached to your hip. There's an umbilical cord that connects to your belly. Like, it never, ever, ever leaves your sight, right? This is how it is. If your parents made you pay for your AirPods, earpods, whatever, you wouldn't lose one of them every other week. Because you'd be like, damn, that's expensive. I can't believe I lost that $200 set of headphones. Your parents don't know you've lost it. They don't know that I got a small collection of half-lost earpods in my desk right now. AirPods, a bunch of other name brands just sitting there. Why? Because you didn't pay for it. I guarantee your parents know exactly how many hours of work it took them to buy you those AirPods that you have lost. So when it's yours, you treat it differently. That's just human nature. So in the case of these collective farms, both in the Russian situation and the Maoist situation, they fail. They do not produce nearly as much food as the Russian and the communist Chinese believe they're going to. So what happens? In the case of Russia, the Holodomor happens. What's the Holodomor? The Holodomor is a man-made famine that happened in Ukraine in the 1930s. So if you think the Ukrainians and the Russians not liking each other is a new story, wake up. They hate each other for generations now. So what you see here, these are quite literally people who are dead, starved to death, in the streets of the city of Kharkiv, which is in Ukraine, and people walking by as there is not enough food to feed these people. Starving to death is a miserable process. It could take you up to 30, 40 days to starve to death. So these are people starving. Now, how can this be when you're in Ukraine, which I have shown you on satellite imagery? Ukraine is one gigantic field. It's just farmland after farmland after farmland. How did they stop producing food? They didn't stop producing food. Here's what basically happened. The Soviets now, were afraid to tell Stalin that his plan to collectivize the farms wasn't working. Refused to tell him this. So instead they said, yeah, it's working great, boss. Great idea. He said, awesome. How much are we producing? And, of course, it's Stalin, right? So if Stalin says we need, I'll make up a number, 1 billion bushels of wheat to get produced, you're not going to tell him, yes, sir, we hit that billion bushel mark. You're going to say, oh, man, 5 billion bushels. We did great. So Stalin goes, we did that good, did we? Awesome. Take all the extra food that we don't need and start selling it to the Chinese. Start selling it to the Koreans. Sell it to anybody who wants to buy it. Let's make some money. But what you don't know, and what people are afraid to tell Stalin, because if you tell Stalin, he's created the aura of fear and terror. So if you tell him that it's not working, you're the reason it's not working, according to Stalin. So what happens instead is, if you have to sell, let's say, all the extra food, but you don't have extra food because you didn't even meet the original goals in the first place, you strip all the people of their food, let them starve, and you take the actual food they produce, which was sufficient to feed their population, and you sell it on the foreign market and give the money to Stalin's government. He pats you on the head like a good little communist. You've done your job for today. I'm not going to kill you today. Well done, communist. But under your watch, the people you supervise in these local territories of Ukraine starve to death because you're seizing their grain. And when they say to you, or you see, hey, they're starving to death, it becomes, we'll work harder. Make more food. Which may not be, I mean, how do you make more food exactly? Just snap your fingers and there's more food? You're planting crops, they go in the ground, they germinate, they harvest, whatever. It's not something you can just control. So this was a fairly typical outcome. The exact same thing happens with Mao. The Great Chinese Famine, which was just a horror show. Here you go. Half of the country is affected because these policies are so bad. And you can read for yourself right here. Just read this paragraph as I chat at you, okay? Half the country, 18% of Anhui died, 15% of Chongqing, 13% of Sichuan, 11% of Guizhou, and 8% of Hunan. You are talking, look at the deaths. Look at the death toll. We don't even know. Because, of course, no one kept data for this. No one's going to tell Mao, hey, boss, that idea you had killed probably about 30 million people. They're not going to do that because they're terrified of him. Now, I don't want to make it seem like Mao and Stalin just didn't know how much it didn't work. And if someone had just told them, they'd have changed their minds. Nope. You would have just died for delivering the bad news. These guys set up auras of terror. And as a result, you set up an aura of terror in your government. The government reacts out of terror, which is a self-preservation reaction. So you can see yourself, the major contributing factors to the famine were the policies of Mao's Great Leap Forward. We often mockingly call it the Great Leap Backwards, where he claimed between these industrial processes of getting the people to make their own steel and then collectivizing the farms, we would leap China into a modern future. It did nothing of the sort. It starved the people. The plans to industrialize China were completely crap. They didn't work. It just failed. Oh yeah, I forgot that. They actually went on a campaign to kill all the birds. This was real. So, on top of trying to exterminate, here you go, the 4 pests. The mosquito, the fly, the sparrow, and the rat. Now, alright, fair enough. Everybody tries to eliminate mosquitoes, flies, and rats. Why are we killing sparrows? Why did they try to kill sparrows? Well, it was considered patriotic and a noble thing for you to help the cause of the Chinese government to kill the sparrows because the sparrows were eating crops, was the belief. That they were somehow or another crop eaters or would disrupt crop production with the way that they fed on seed and things like that. If you have to kill the sparrows in China to get your food to grow, and this has never happened in China's 3,000-year history, something tells me the problem isn't the sparrows. Something tells me the problem is your crap policy. Didn't the killing of sparrows cause the famine because it's not to eat the bugs? Well, it had knock-on effects, yes. So then all of a sudden, if the sparrows were, for example, feasting on locusts or something like that, or locust larvae, and now locusts were able to sort of germinate, then all of a sudden, locusts are basically flying crickets that eat crops. Or insert your bug issue here that consumes your crops. Yeah, that was, stuff like that was commonplace. So, I mean, this is the insanity of this man's rule. I mean, it wasn't based in anything. It wasn't like there was some sort of grand plan here. It was whatever Mao felt made sense at the time. And you can see it for yourself. Widespread oral reports of cannibalism. I mean, it's hard to imagine it didn't happen. I mean, if you're starving to death and, Grandpa dies, Grandpa's a meal. I mean, are you going to willingly let yourself die because you're starving to death? I know you might say, I'm not eating Grandpa. What the hell is wrong with you? I know, but you're also not starving right now. And your son's not starving right now. And your 2-month-old isn't starving right now. And you're so sick as a mother that you can't produce breast milk to feed your infant baby. So if you don't eat something, your baby dies. You put all that together, Grandpa's a big chicken wing. I mean, let's be realistic, right? So that's, so do we know? I mean, it seems likely. I mean, most incidences of cannibalism in human culture really aren't sort of decisions. They're much more necessity out of stress, being in a situation where there's no other choice, that kind of thing. So it just was an ultimate failure, just a disaster, stupid beyond belief. But nevertheless, this is what he did. So more Mao blunders to come. So the Great Leap Forward was a massive leap backwards. It was a complete disaster, built on the idea that Mao's policies and ideas of collectivizing the farm and having individuals in sort of uncontrolled conditions try to create steel, even though they've never done it before. I mean, if you think this looks like something that's working, I mean, I got a bridge to sell you. So that's Mao's sort of initial screw ups. Now it keeps getting worse. Mao continues to sort of be at odds with the Soviets, and even after the death of Stalin, as the Soviet Union began to sort of move towards and away from Stalin's worst policies, like getting rid of the gulags and getting rid of the purges and things like that, under its new leadership, a communist leadership still and dictators nevertheless, but as it started to peel away from that Stalinist era, it also sort of turns back on Mao in general, and not really seeing Mao or China as really part of their cultural allies. So Mao had done so poorly, and China was in such dire shape, that his own party, the Communist Party, actually removes Mao. They remove him and basically send him off to early retirement. And they put in place this guy named Deng Xiaoping. Now, Deng Xiaoping, as we're going to see, Mao's not done yet. Deng Xiaoping is easily the most, very controversial, but objectively had the most positive impact on Chinese development in the 20th century of any Chinese leader. Now, he did some horrible stuff, but he did a lot of really good things. So it's a mixed bag here. So he is put in power as the guy who the Communist Party of China now wants to run the show. And he immediately begins putting in reforms. Just like very similar to the Soviet Union. Here's a comparison. When Stalin when Stalin died, there was an immediate effort by the government to de-Stalinize, to get rid of some of the worst policies of Stalin. When Mao is thrown out of the party and kind of sent off to vacation, and this guy comes into place, one of the first things he does is try to put economic reforms in. He tries to abandon some of the harder line communist policies in favor of practical solutions that will, for example, bring growth and wealth to the average Chinese, and that will make the nation in general stronger. So just to kind of put that all in perspective, there was a saying attributed to Mao, whether or not he said it is sort of in dispute, but it was something like, I don't care if a cat is white or black as long as it catches mice. In other words, he's a pragmatist. He believes that what matters is not the philosophical roots of an idea. Is this how communists are supposed to act? That's not him. That's Mao. That's not him. For him, it's how do we fix the problems? Is the solution capitalism? Then introduce some capitalism. Is the solution something else? Then introduce that. He's a pragmatist. He's an authoritarian. I'm not making him into a moral character. He's not a moral character. He's an authoritarian. But he is a practical authoritarian. He wanted things that worked, not things that were sort of nice and shiny and fit the philosophical ideas behind communism. However, his initial rule doesn't last very long. Mao, in a desperate bid to regain power, goes for his secret weapon here, and that's a thing called the Cultural Revolution. So the Cultural Revolution, I mean, this sums it up in some pretty drastic ways. The Cultural Revolution was Mao directly reaching out to Chinese youth, which I told you all but worship the man. And he says, look, Mr. Jello Jerry, how did Deng Xiaoping come to power after Mao? Well, I'm doing that right now. So, Mao's voted out, Deng Xiaoping is voted in. While Mao is out of power, he wants his power back. And he decides to tap his most loyal followers, the young people of China. So we're talking people in age from about 15 to 25. So high school students and college students in particular, educated young people, and also rural people who simply were in love with Mao's sort of promised reforms of communism. And so what he basically calls on is for these people to wipe out the old traditions of China, saying that those traditions are the shackles that are threatening the communist revolution that he started. And if we want to see true equality, true peace, and true freedom in China, we need to eliminate this element from our society. We need to take off that sickly, gangrenous limb and hack it off. And hack it off was fairly literal. He instructed these young people to basically form into revolutionary squads engaged in street violence, targeting what he considered traditional elements of China. This would have been, for example, traditional Chinese Confucian and Buddhist temples, Taoist temples, education facilities, professors, teachers, elders, any sort of government official that Mao had deemed to somehow be contrary to the cause of China. He starts telling people, get them, basically. Get them, get them, get them. And based on this cult of personality, where he's near a figure of worship, and his strong, is this what caused Tiananmen Square massacre? No, it's not. But this did lead to a great deal of what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say, well, it led to a huge number of Chinese, an entire generation, believing the system was a corrupt and elaborate lie concocted by Mao's enemies. And they basically concentrated on murdering, shaming, beating their elders in society, directly against Confucian sort of concepts. And when Mao finally pushes the nation to the brink with this army of sort of crazed young people, he's invited by the Communist Party to retake his seat as the head of the Communist Party and the head of China, so long as he is able to put down and settle in these rebellions around the country, these cultural uprisings. And he promises he can. When he gets back into power, he actually doesn't seem able to do that. And in the absence of any other choice, he basically brings out the military to start quelling his own armies of hyper-loyal children, for lack of a better term. What led to the Tiananmen Square massacre came later. Mao will rule China until his death from that point forward, at which point, happy that he's finally out of the way, the Chinese government puts Deng Xiaoping back into place, the same guy as before, and they let him start to really reenact those reforms. And at this point, you're into almost, the late 60s, early 70s. And he starts to do that. He starts to introduce capitalist elements into the Chinese economy. And this is very, very successful. So Deng Xiaoping is 100% responsible for that. He then extends what was already in place in terms of in terms of the authoritarianism of the Chinese government. He extends that and even adds to it to a certain degree. So as an example, Tiananmen Square is a good example of this. Deng Xiaoping is running China in 1985. When is Tiananmen Square? I want to say 1985. 1989. God, I'm off. All right, 1989. So the Tiananmen Square protest happened in 1989. And basically what happens is there's calls among students. This is a generation after the Cultural Revolution. There are calls among students to enact reforms to make China more democratic. Now, to be honest, these students didn't know what they were talking about. They would say words like democratic, but they had no idea what it was because democracy was not allowed to be taught in China. You were not allowed to preach the benefits of democracy or capitalism or anything like it. It was not in the system. And of course, this is before the age of the internet, so any information they have is absolutely secondhand. So there is at first the death of a party leader who was a reformer, and after his death, a group of students gather in Tiananmen Square to sort of celebrate his death as a moment of respect because this government official had tried to reform the government in the way it operates with its people, and he was fairly popular. His death triggers more and more and more students to, it was just natural causes death, more and more students to show up to pay respect. And these calls for respect and honor of this man became sort of organically calls for changes in the political structure of China, particularly in the university systems. And things like they want better dorm conditions. They want better food. They really are asking for democracy, but they don't really know what democracy is. So for them, democracy just kind of means better treatment on our day-to-day lives. They don't really understand what they're asking for. But the Chinese government absolutely did understand what they were asking for. And if you were going to ask for something like they want democracy, you're going to be met with probably military force to be subjugated. And that's basically what happens. The Chinese government, after a very, very, very long standoff, I want to say a couple weeks, they actually bring in the middle of the night, tanks, soldiers armed with active rounds, rifles, and things like that. And they start blasting their way into Tiananmen Square, and you get the Tiananmen Square massacre. Again, this is very modern. It's 1989. So I have no doubt whatsoever if I just scroll down a little, there's got to be some sort of pictures of the massacre, I would think. Unless, of course, somebody's come along and taken them down. That's also entirely possible. They had hunger strikers, like this guy here, who literally was like passing out from lack of food. These are the students who all attempted to create... Yeah, this is so detailed because it is. Yeah, these are the kind of tanks that were rolling into the city, crushing civilians and firing on people. I mean, this was the kind of weapons. These are, a sort of modified Kalashnikov rifle that is used to suppress the crowd by firing at them and killing them. So that's the Tiananmen Square massacre. That all happens under Deng Xiaoping. When Deng Xiaoping himself finally dies, a few other leaders of China emerge, but now today the leader is Xi Jinping, who absolutely has a ton of power, perhaps more than definitely more than Mao ever had, because he's very capable of holding his power. But on a similar level to sort of Deng Xiaoping, he is the effective leader of China for life now, Xi Jinping. This is the guy that looks like Winnie the Pooh, if you recall. Yeah, you can absolutely use any of this stuff as evidence that I'm telling you about. Especially the more specific the story, the more likely you can use it. So, but like anything, just make sure you tie it back to the actual prompt. Okay, like that's on you. So Xi Jinping runs China today. We've been through so much of this stuff in terms of the Uyghurs, his crackdown on various things, introduction of social credit scores, introduction of forced sort of rehabilitation for people who are displaying an undesirable trait or an undesirable behavior. This is all pretty common stuff. So that is more or less bringing us to modern China today, where China is absolutely in this weird position where they, on the one hand, are the world's second richest nation, but on the other hand, also have incredible amounts of famine within their borders, pretty significantly. So that's kind of all I got for that up to the modern day. Y'all tell me, what else would you like to talk about? I know I'd say I stayed till midnight, but I gotta be honest, I'm already starting to fade. I think I have like 10-15 minutes left in me, and then I'll see you in the morning. But you let me know. I am planning to post a video for you to watch in the morning. So it'll go up in the middle of the night, probably before you're ever awake. And it's not review, it's just a little message from me to you. All right? I recommend you watch it on your own before you leave the house. All right? It's the same video for everybody, obviously. And just take it to heart, what I say and how I say it and what I think about the work you guys put in for this year. So I want to make sure you have that when you wake up in the morning as sort of like the first thing you get to experience is my dulcet tones greeting you in the morning, telling you it's time to do what you came here to do. So watch it or don't. It's your decision. It's going to be on AP Classroom. Google Classroom. You'll find it there. It'll be a link. And if you want to listen to it on the bus or whatever you want to do, just feel free to check it out. It's just got some sort of last-minute advice from me. Basics, fairly cute writing. Yeah, sure I can. So what are the basics? The basics are this. You want 4 points. That's the goal, okay? There's only 6 available. Let's get 4. Thesis is a must. Got to have a thesis. You need to take whatever your topic is and break it down into smaller but manageable categories of investigation. So there's a big idea. What are the pieces of it you're going to explore? Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, you need context. Context needs to be related to the prompt, which means the easiest way to do context is to give the background of your thesis. So what are the background elements of your thesis? Because your thesis is connected to your prompt. So if you have a prompt and you write, well, you're going to get a prompt, and you write the thesis, and the thesis makes sense for the prompt, and then you connect the prompt and your answer to it in the form of your thesis to your context, and you reference it in your context. I don't mean physically connect. I mean talk about how this proves that in your context. And don't say, this proves I'm right, this proves anything. Don't say it like that. Say, this demonstrates this relationship, whatever that relationship is, okay? That's the first two. Third point, got to have evidence. Now, the truth is in the LEQ, there's no one there to help you. You got to just have the evidence, so make it so. What's a good thesis for the DBQ? I don't know, man. It depends on the DBQ. It depends what the question is. And how do we write in the document groupings in the thesis? So the way you do document groupings in the thesis for the DBQ, let me finish that for Riley's question, because let me think back to that. So back to the LEQ for a second. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm tired. So thesis context, you have to put in the piece of evidence, and once again, follow that T method, TEA, I showed you in class. It still works for any bit of information. What is the topic sentence, which should be in the beginning of your paragraph? Describe the evidence, so provide the E, the evidence, and then analyze how your description of the evidence proves that the original contention is in fact correct. So that would be on you to do. Oh, jeez, I spilled my coffee. God damn it. That's shameful. Oh, well. It's totally empty. That's really a beat. Okay, so that's number one. So the evidence is 2 different points. You got to provide the evidence and then also explain how it makes your point. That's 2 more points. If you do all that, that's 4. The very easy point in the LEQ is absolutely going to be the reasoning skill. If it's a change essay, talk about change. If it's a continuity essay, talk about continuity. Oh my God, the coffee's everywhere. If it's a essay about cause and effect, talk about cause or effect. Like, if you bring that stuff up, yeah, rip coffee. More like rip my printer, rip my carpet, and rip my mouse pad here, and rip my shirt now, because that's all I got here. Yeah, so that's the parts of the LEQ you can do. So if you do all those, you should be fine. I recommend, it doesn't hurt, I know it's a little bit late, but go on to the practice AP free or FRQs, find any practice LEQ you want. Don't look at the first student sample. It's always perfect. Look at the second student sample, which is usually a 4 or 5, and see what they did. I did this today with Juliet, and we looked at one of these together, and I was like, okay, Juliet, can you do this? This is a 5. And she said, absolutely, I can do that. Well, there you go. So do that. These are the standards of every point are not all that difficult. It's about consistency and doing what you're asked to do. As for the DBQ, you write the document groupings by writing down the theme. If you see there's 3 documents that talk about, for example, the need for Muslim women to be educated so they can have an independent presence in the world, then you say, one of the ways in which Muslim women challenged the political norms of the time was to demand education so they could take their place in the world, comma, add your next theme after that. That's how you do it. That's depressing. My whole office smells like coffee now. Rough. All right. What else? Yeah, the print will be fine. I think it's fine. It'll be okay. Other issues regarding the AP exam. I'm more awake now that I've spilled coffee everywhere than drinking the coffee had kept me awake. So. I'm greeted by silence. No one's chatting. So I'm going to... DBQ thesis with the categories. What does that mean? Right, complete sentences. I don't talk in half thoughts. What does that mean? Should I say the documents I'm using? No. In the intro? No. Don't be like, documents 1, 2, and 4 show, and documents 3, 4, and 5 do not do that. Do what I said. It's not an argument if you didn't create it. So the groupings are your choices, what you think work together. These documents corroborate each other because they all talk about the idea of whatever, okay? Like, how would you write a thesis with categories? But you keep saying this. You're killing me, dude. DBQ doesn't have categories. DBQ has document groupings. You're murdering me here. In the period of X, Y, the blah blah affected blah blah because of X, Y, and Z. You know, you're using X and Y to mean two different things from X, Y, and Z. Okay. How do you do it? The way I just said. You don't do that. Well, I mean, you kind of do it like that. It depends on the. You want me to give you a generic answer to questions that are not going to be generic. You have to read the DBQ. If you get analyze the causes of the Mexican Revolution versus how did Muslim women in the 20th century demand political reform, that's not the same thing. A generic response does not cover those. You have to read the actual prompt. What you need to do is when you write a prompt, you have to directly respond to the prompt. That's always been true. Then in the documents, you need to find, it's on you, what are the thematic linkages between several of the documents. And then you identify that linkage in your intro. You don't have to describe it. You don't have to explain it. You identify that linkage. So, for example, if you, for instance, look around me here, I've got two posters on the wall back there. That one's from an old Nintendo game. That one's from the Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. So if I turned around and said, okay, considering what is the common theme between them, I've got a Nintendo Entertainment System wizard, and I've got a Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual poster back there. You can thematically group them that Malvagno has an interest in fantasy characters from popular media. Like, that's a thematic group. Like, I wouldn't go document 1, document 2. I wouldn't do that. Not in the intro. Do that in the body. In the body, you could say Malvagno has an interest in fantasy gaming and that particular genre. Document 1 is a picture of a pixelated wizard from an old Nintendo game, etc. All right, that's how you would do it. But again, there is no generic, there is no silver bullet to any part of this test. There is no, as long as I write this, I will get points. Somebody said that today in class. So didn't you say, if it's this answer, always pick it? No. In fact, I'm the guy who's told you, never say never, never say always. Because if I find one example where that's wrong, you are wrong. So never ever commit to some sort of universal rule. This is not how these things work here, all right? You need to do the job that's in front of you. You need to make sure you know what the job is you've been asked to do, especially on the essays. If they ask you for X, you cannot give them Y. You have to give them X. What is an example of colonizing power using force threats to force or colonize in the 19th and 20th century? The entire African scramble for Africa. I mean, absolutely. More or less every single one of them. No, all right, there's no such thing as a willing colony. Never seen it. It's no problem, Vivian. Never seen a willing colony in my life. Who are the people who go, thanks for coming. Listen, don't shoot us. Just take over. Never seen it. Never heard of it. Maybe there's an example I'm not aware of, but I've never heard of anybody going, what a wonderful idea that you're here to take us over. We absolutely approve and think you should move right in. Everybody resists. Everybody resists. But if you want an example from that time period, that comes right to mind. The Scramble for Africa would be the most obvious example of that. God, my room stinks of coffee. This is so sad. What else? Do 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 do. Do 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 do. How can I talk about colonies during the World Wars? Well, why would you talk about colonies during the World Wars? Like, how are they used? Well, again, why would you? That doesn't exist, Ray. If you read the LEQs and you go, I don't know anything, you need to close your eyes, take a deep breath, stop panicking, gather up your guts a little bit, open your eyes, and realize you're lying to yourself. There is no chance that you read those the three LEQs and you know nothing about any of them. That does not exist. That would require me to have not done anything like my job for the entire year. And I know I did my job. So absolutely it is the case that you have learned everything to some degree and some things to a great degree. So there is it's not possible. I do not accept the premise of the question. Now, let's see if Sam clarified what he meant. If it's on the snap. Huh? What do you mean by snap? You do know the SAQ. You have choices there as well. You have 2 questions to choose from for 3 and 4. What if it's on the DBQ? All right, so why would a DBQ say, hey, listen, ignore World War II like it never happened. Talk to me about what happened in them colonies. I just don't know what question you're trying to answer. Like, if you have a specific in mind, let me know the specific. If you're giving me hypothetical combinations of historical issues that may or may not materialize in a question, let me just tell you, I'll go back to what I said today in class. You've now done over 150 plus practice questions from practice AP exams. If you have not seen the issue you're worried about mentioned on any of those questions, the issue is not going to exist on the AP exam. That would be my sort of hot take on that. Good. Anybody else? Final call. Because then I got to steam vac this carpet, wipe coffee off the wall, open the windows, and try to see if this printer has been destroyed by coffee flying into its gears. What if we don't know anything? Ray. Somebody, anybody. Give Ray a hug. Ray's very worried about things he doesn't need to worry about. All right? Here's reality, Ray. You have the document. Yeah? The document is required to answer those questions. So, if nothing else, you have the document. Okay? Is that Nick Friedlander? Why? How hard do you think this test is going to be? Logan showed up. God help us all. All right, Riley, I'm going to tell you the truth. How hard is this test going to be? This test is hard. It's hard. But the issue isn't how hard is the test. The issue is how are you going to do, which is a different question. The test is hard for everybody taking it. It's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be difficult. What you can do is to make sure you do the best you can by making small assurances, guarantees in your own mind that don't make you screw up. As an example, if you're not in the habit of bubbling as you go, but get out of that habit. Bubble as you go. You don't want to be in a position at the end of the exam where you have 2 minutes left and you're scrambling to get all 55 questions bubbled in before they pull your answer sheet. It increases your chance of making a bubbling error. It increases the chance you have questions that go unanswered at all because you didn't finish. That is the kind of thing where you just basically shot yourself in the foot. So don't do stuff like that. Don't forget to do a section. Don't forget you have to do 3 SAQ questions. Don't forget, oh man, I didn't do a context for the DBQ. Oh crap, I forgot to do an outside evidence or evidence beyond the documents for the DBQ. Don't forget things. Like, that's really the secret. The secret is just do the test. The people who do poorly either have ignored chunks of the test, ignored chunks of their learning, or basically have decided to use this is the fastest shortcut out because they can't do it anymore. That's who ends up with bad grades. If you have the right mentality and the right mindset going in, recognizing it's going to be difficult, but nothing that is worth doing is easy, you'll do fine. If you put context at the end of the entire essay, it will still count. But of course, I think you can realize that that means you've also waited until the end of the essay. So that means if it's the DBQ, you've waited until the end, and now you're cutting into your LEQ time. If it's the LEQ, you could potentially be running out of time altogether, and now you have a chance to do it because you waited till the end. I don't want the context at the end. The context requires 2 or 3 well-written sentences for a point. That is very good value for effort. So putting it at the end is not a thing I recommend at all. Who else? Everett. On the DBQ is sourcing its own paragraph or just throughout the evidence paragraphs. Well, you could do it either way. I know that I've been unable to convince some people. Heinler has convinced you that chasing these black dogs in the night is worth your time. But okay. If you're going to do sourcing, you could do it as its own paragraph or simply add it as extra information every time you're talking about documents already. Again, I advise against even attempting these points. The the juice is not worth the squeeze. And inevitably, you're going to have an opportunity cost and some lost value somewhere else. Some other part of your essay will be less good because you spent time working on this part of your essay. Those other parts of your essays that are less good are fine as long as they're good enough to get points. If they're not good enough to get points and you waste your time tinkering with this other thing, which you're almost certainly not going to get the point anyway, to what value was it all? So you really have to kind of consider these kinds of things. I really, really don't recommend attempting to do sourcing, and I don't recommend that you attempt to do any attempt at a complexity point. It's just really not worth it. For sourcing, we just say what they wrote, and that supports my thesis, right? So again, I'm going to say, if you think it's simple, you're going to get it wrong. This is why I say don't do it, okay? I know some of you want to prove me wrong. I have news for you. This is important to remember. You will not know your essay score. They're never going to tell you. I will not know your essay score. They're never going to tell me. So if you get a 5 or you get a 4, you'll never know. Hey, man, how did my sourcing do? Did it work out all right? Did I get it wrong? You'll never know. Just keep that in mind. It's like one day you're going to be able to go back and go, oh, Malvagno said I couldn't do it, but ha, 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 look at him. I did it. Nope, I'll never know and you'll never know. So just do keep that in mind. So, anything that's like, oh, just do this and it'll be fine. Again, I don't care what you saw on Heimler or anybody else. It's not that simple. If it was that simple, more than 30% of all students would get points. Most students don't get this point. Are you allowed to use abbreviations? Well, BC, yes, for sure. You're allowed to use abbreviations. In general, for most things, you should not abbreviate. Dates, absolutely you can. However, for most things, you really shouldn't abbreviate. So, like, especially with my persons, places, things, stuff like that, you shouldn't really abbreviate. If BC meant because, and you didn't mean BC like CE, BCE, if you meant because, you definitely shouldn't do that. No slang. That becomes slang, basically. Don't do that. All right, last call. I'm quite tired, and I have coffee to clean up. All right, so I'm going to take that silence to mean that we are, in fact, done. Thank you all for joining me. Again, please remember, early in the morning tomorrow, I'm going to have a video up there for you to check out. Again, you can watch it or not, your call, but I think you'll find it valuable. And for the LEQ, are analysis and reasoning worth going for or not, in your opinion? No, it's time out. For the LEQ, yes. Well, what do you mean by analysis? If analysis means the fancy point, no. Reasoning, you absolutely need to go for on the LEQ. All you have to do to get reasoning is just do the skill. If it's causation, talk about causes. If it's effect, talk about effects. You absolutely need to do that, yes. All right, I am actually done. This is me signing off and ignoring all remaining chat or questions. I'll see you all in the morning. Figure I'll be there 6:45, 6:50, something like that. And you can hang in my room straight through until the test, you get called down to assemble for the test. If there's some first period class you're skipping, I won't ask any questions. And that's that. All right, gang, it's been a pleasure. I'll talk to you in the morning. Bye.